Good morning, Pony. Morning, Bonaventure. Good morning, Justus. Good morning, Bonaventure. Kindly confirm if you can hear me. Yes, good morning, Bonnie.
I'm testing. You can hear me now? You can hear me?
Yes. Yes, good morning, Benventure.
And now,
Yes, but you're going to disable your video. Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
good morning.
I'm CPA Esther Kaliwat Sache, coordinator for this program. In the morning, we shall have financial reporting. Mid-morning, 11 to 12:30, we shall be having financial management. And then in the afternoon, 2 to 3:30, we shall be having public financial management. Kindly remind all your friends that registered for these webinars and are going to be there. Our session chair for today is CPA Claire Najuko, who will take you through this session. Claire, you're welcome.
Yes, good morning, members. Thank you, Esther, for that kind introduction. Kindly confirm that you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Yeah. So this morning, I just have a very simple task. And our rules of engagement are that if we have questions, concerns, we shall post them in the Q&A. And the presenter will present for roughly 1 hour. And then we shall have questions and answers in the last 30 minutes. So I'll give a brief profile of our presenter this morning, who is going to take us through how to pass financial reporting that is CPA paper 7. His name is CPA Duhimbazi Bonventure. CPA Duhimbazi Bonventure is a finance and accounting associate consultant at the Uganda Management Institute, UMI. He is currently the principal internal auditor at the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, UNBS. He has worked both as an internal auditor in the internal audit department, as well as compliance officer in the domestic tax department of the Uganda Revenue Authority, that is URA. CPA Bonventure has experience in banking and in project management, accounting and reporting, obtained while working as a project accountant. So here at ICPAU, we felt that CPA Bonventure was the best person to give us the techniques on how to pass financial reporting in our forthcoming exams. CPA Bonventure, you're most welcome to speak to us.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Good morning once again. Thank you for that brief introduction. And I hope I'm going to add value to the attendees of this engagement. As you've given a preamble, I'm directly going to talk for 1 hour, close to 1 hour or less. And we should have to allow 30 minutes for questions and answers, and maybe to elaborate more on what the attendees will be wanting me to elaborate more on. Let me share my screen. I hope my screen can be seen. I'm just going to talk about financial reporting, paper 7. And what I'm going to cover, I'm just going to look at a brief introduction. I look at the syllabus overview. Then I look at the expectations of candidates, what is expected from candidates. And I look at common causes of failure in this paper. I will pick some examples from some past papers and probably elaborate more. Then we shall conclude. I believe I'll be able to cover, I will be able to address people's expectations. Here, I believe the questions will come afterwards, and everyone who has a question, kindly note it down or write it in the chat, then it will be addressed. So, this paper, CPA 7, which is financial reporting, is one of the papers on level 2. It's at level 2. Students and tutors, probably they are present here. They have to know that this paper builds on the understanding of financial accounting, paper 1, and prepares someone to be able to sit for paper 12, advanced financial reporting. So I always mention and state that if you didn't cover financial accounting thoroughly as you are attending to this paper, you may need to revisit some areas in financial accounting. That's CPA paper 1. Because some of the areas covered under CPA paper 1 are vital, and indeed they are vital in this paper 7, financial reporting. Remember, in paper 1, that's where you find the double entry system. So if you do not understand the double entry system and you come for this paper, you may need to constantly revisit the double entry system. If you do not understand how depreciation is computed under CPA paper 1, then if you are attending to a tuition provider and the tuition provider may assume that already you know how to compute depreciation. Mind you, if you pass the CPA paper 1 by luck, you may need to do an extra mile to go and find out how certain aspects in the CPA paper 1 that are required in this paper 7 are arrived at. And this paper equips the student with skills necessary for preparing and interpreting financial statements to various users and stakeholders. So ideally, when you are attending to this paper, your mind should be tickling on how to prepare financial statements, how you can interpret them to the various users. So you realize that a number of things that are covered under this paper, according to the syllabus overview, it has a number of learning outcomes. And here, one of them is to describe the financial reporting framework. Number 2 is must be able to measure the elements of financial statements. What are the elements of financial statements? This one was covered under paper 1, but still, at this level, you must be knowing what are the elements of financial statements. For example, you must be knowing that we have assets, we have liabilities, we have incomes, we have expenses, we have capital. So you must be knowing all of those elements and how they are measured. Then you must be able to prepare accounting records. Then you must be able to prepare financial statements for internal and external use. And also you must be able to apply selected international financial reporting standards. You must be able to analyze financial statements. You must be able to interpret accounting information and financial statements. You must be able to prepare consolidated financial statements of a simple group, of a simple structure that is consisting of 1 or 2 companies, parent and 1 subsidiary. Then you must be able also to prepare accounting records for entities under receivership and liquidation. As these are the learning outcomes, if you're preparing for this paper, you must answer all of these questions. Your mind should be filled with a number of these things, items 1 to 9. So, if you're preparing to sit for this paper, kindly use this one as a checklist. As you go to, because you'll find that whichever paper is examining, it is testing these listed items, the learning outcomes. The syllabus contains every number of aspects. I think they are like 24, can call them chapters. This paper covers the conceptual framework of financial reporting. Remember, one of the learning outcomes is that you must be able to describe the financial reporting framework, meaning this one comes to the conceptual framework of financial reporting. If you go back to the learning outcome, preparing financial statements for internal and external use, when you come to the syllabus overview, you'll find IS1 presentation of financial statements. So you can link the learning outcomes to the syllabus. Now, the syllabus also contains I7, that statement of cash flows. I-33, that's earnings per share, analysis and interpretation of financial statements. I-8, accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates and errors. IFRS 15, revenue from contracts with customers. Income taxes, property, plant and equipment, leases, inventory. IS-20 that talks about government grants. 21 that talks about exchange, the effect of changes in foreign exchange rates. 23 that talks about borrowing costs. 36 that talks about impairment. 37 that talks about provisions. 38 that talks about intangible assets. 40 that talks about investment property. 41 that talks about agriculture. IFRS 3, that's business combinations. IFRS 6, exploration. IFRS 10, consolidated financial statements, and IFRS 13, fair value measurement. Now, as you go through what is covered under this paper, the listed items 1 up to 10, though some have been abbreviated. As you go through, you must be in a position to go back to the learning outcomes. 1 and 2, learning outcomes 1 and 2 is covered under 1. Then if you go to preparing accounting records, a number of these standards also require having some accounting records prepared. If you go back to preparing financial statements, a number of these standards under here talk about the presentation in financial statements, recognition and measurement. When you talk about applying selected international financial reporting standards, that's the same thing. When you talk about analyzing financial statements, is here and number 5. When you talk about interpreting accounting information, as you prepare and apply selected financial reporting standards, you must be able to create meaning in the reader. The same applies to consolidated financial statements, that's self-explanatory, and receivership, point is under receivership. Accounting records for those entities also is self-explanatory. So I always urge that whenever you're preparing for this paper, don't say we have taught standard this one and we have completed. The question is, how does that standard affect maybe presentation of financial statements, affect analysis and interpretation, you must be able to affect the measurement of the elements of financial statements. You must be in respect to these learning outcomes. I believe to the attendees, I think they should be picking a point. If I'm looking at, for example, I normally use inventory. If I'm looking at inventory, which is IS2, when you go to recognition and measurement, you realize that I'm looking at the measurement of the elements of financial statements. How do you measure inventory? Then how do you present it? It comes to the preparation of financial statements. Then if inventory is increasing or if it is reducing, how does that one feed into the analysis of financial statements? Someone must be able to link this. So I always urge the candidates preparing for this paper, kindly learn how to integrate the learning outcomes to the syllabus contents. If you are studying and attending to a tutor, or the tutor who is teaching you must be able to connect these two things. Just not teaching about a certain standard and you don't go into its actual application, presentation, and recognition, plus the measurement. Otherwise, you will know this is the IFRS 15 revenue from contracts with customer, But the question is, how will I present? How will I recognize? How would I measure? Have you answered all of those three? Otherwise, you will go to preparing financial statements, you recognize revenue, but the revenue you've recognized, you have not measured it well. Are we together there? If there is any liability or an asset to arise as a result of that, the contract assets and contract liabilities, how will you recognize them? Have you measured them rightly? Okay. Then there's a number of expectations that are required of candidate. A candidate or student must have an deep understanding of CPA 1, and that one I'd mentioned it. Financial accounting. To attempt to pass this paper, you must have information regarding what is covered under financial accounting, because this paper builds on financial accounting. So if you pass the financial accounting just by luck, as you're preparing for this paper, you need to go to certain aspects of financial accounting so that you understand them deeper. 2, it is expected that someone must have covered at least 80%, if not 100% of the syllabus and the learning outcomes covered under this paper. 3, someone must be knowing the application of the different aspects of this paper in real life scenarios, because if you look at the past papers that have been examined by institute, you realize that most of the questions come in scenarios, the reality of the environment. So it's not just having a book knowledge. I always normally give an example of ideally, if I'm in a business and I have a vehicle, that vehicle will be my property, plant, and equipment. But ideally, if I go to the car bond owners, those guys who trade in cars, the vehicles they have basically is inventory. So if the question is covering someone who is dealing in vehicles, or dealing in land, like a real estate, or dealing in buildings, ideally, when you look at the business environment, the person is trading in items of PPE. So the application of IS 16 ceases to appear to those things. Now you start applying IS 2. Like, for example, real estate business that is buying and selling land, and maybe building and constructing houses and selling them. Whereas in another person's business environment, having a building will be an asset that is covered under I-16, and the aspects of I-16 must be used in this measurement, recognition, and presentation. When it comes to a real estate business, the building is inventory. So you must know the application of the aspects of this paper to real life scenarios. Otherwise, you will find yourself thinking this is IS-16, yet is IS-2. Or you think this is IS-16, yet is IS-40, investment property. I hope we are together here. I always ask people that if my business is buying and selling of cattle, cows, ideally, cows are, and the person may think that these biological assets are covered under IS-41. Plainly, it is okay if I'm rearing them. But to someone who is trading in them, buying and selling them, these cows have come out to be inventory. So when you apply the aspects of the contents covered under this paper to the real life scenarios, then you will appreciate what I'm trying to talk about. And probably when you are reading a question that is before you and you need to attempt it, you must understand the business environment, and you know that whereas actually cattle falls under IS-41 ideally, but this person is buying and selling cattle. So whatever is buying and selling is the inventory. What is rearing, what he or she is rearing, is what follows under IS41. Are we together? Then number 4, you must have developed an understanding of how the different standards integrate with each other. I've given you an example. Someone is dealing in buying and selling of cattle and probably is rearing some. It means the ones is rearing are covered under IS41, agriculture. The ones is buying and selling are covered under IS2. Now, you realize now that IS2 and IS41 are moving together at that particular moment. So depending on the question that is brought before you, you should be able to know that integration. 2, I always tell people that when you look at IS16, that is property, plant, and equipment. Do you realize that I could be having a PPE that has been leased, that has been acquired as through a leasing arrangement? The question is, do you see that it is being connected to IFRS 16 leases? As I'm having that item, do you realize as with time, this item is likely to get impaired? Do you see the connection with 36? Or as I'm having this item of property, plant, and equipment, I can decide it to be designated as an investment property. Do you see its connection with IS40? So as you are trying to understand the details covered under this paper, that kind of integration needs to be known, because you realize that a number of questions that come or that have been examined, you will find that you will find more than one standard in one question. And you will find that kind of integration having been incorporated. Now, if you have never prepared for that kind of integration, when you are preparing for this paper, attempting that question becomes hard. For example, if we look at the last, that is September, at the November 60th, there was a question number 3, whereby they're saying a company, which was called J Printers, was contracted to provide printing services. Now that is it. Now, as it is providing printing services at a certain cost, that's the revenue with customers. So IFRS 15 comes into play. But to fulfill this aspect, this person went ahead and acquired a number of some specialized printers. Now the person is acquiring PPE. Now 16 is coming into play. Whereas it is coming under cost to fulfill a contract. But if you go and read this question in detail and the standard as well, via IFRS 15, you'll find that these costs of this printer were ideally PPE. So you'll find at the same time, IFRS 15 has been integrated with PPE in the question. Now, as you're preparing to sit for this paper, along, by the way, in the same question, they went ahead and also brought in the aspects of income tax. That's the IS12. So you'll find there is some way of integration of these standards. And when you come to the real life scenarios, these standards are integrated. I easily integrate. So as you are preparing, or as you are studying from wherever you will be studying from, as a candidate, you need to ask yourself, or ask the tutor, how can this standard integrate with the other, or the other, or the other? When you come to real life. Then the last thing, you must know the effect of the various standards covered under this paper in the preparation of financial statements and as well the journal entries. You see, you cannot prepare you cannot ever prepare financial statements if you have not known and understood the journal entries that are supposed to be made. What do you debit and what do you credit? Then eventually, how is it presented in the financial statement? Now you realize that journal double entry was taught under financial accounting. Now, someone facilitating you in this paper may presume that you understand the double entry. If you don't understand it, it's good to ask this person to tell you the basics of how the double entry is coming about. Otherwise, someone may assume that you know. If you don't know, it's better you have to go back. That's what I told. I told you that at the beginning, you must have understood financial accounting because the knowledge in the financial accounting will be applicable. So if you are saying debit this, credit this, the question is, why debit and why credit? Someone is asking about double entry. So if you didn't understand double entry at financial accounting, you need to go back and revisit so that you are acquaint yourself with that knowledge. So it's not that when you're preparing for this paper, you must only rely on the content in this paper. Sometimes you must go back to the contents in financial accounting for you to understand certain things much better. I hope I'm very clear here. Then, during the examination, now you've prepared and you are ready. And now you've come to the examination room. I expect the candidate to read and understand the requirements of each question before attempting it. The answer to this question is why. You will find the question is covering 1 page or plus. The question is the time you will take to read a page or two. It's a lot. But reading something and you reach to the requirement of the question and you can't attempt, you've wasted your time. Are we together here? So if I read and they say, as the students of financial reporting, explain the condition that must be met for an entity to recognize costs incurred to fulfill a contract in accordance with the requirements of 15. The question is, if I can't attempt this, why do I go to read the scenario? Are we together? So you must first read the understand the requirements of each question so that as you are reading the scenario, you know what am I supposed to give. You will realize that some aspects within the requirement under each question may not require a candidate to go and read the case. And if you know them, you directly write them, and maybe you find another part is what is requiring the case. So there, even you save time. So some people who don't finish, they may think that time wasn't enough, but it's basically on how they have managed their time. Part of the time has been wasted in reading something you're not going to attempt. And I always ask, if you know number one is compulsory, and you must attempt it at whatever cost. If you go and read its requirement and you can attempt it, yes, you can begin with it. But if you find you are going to add a lot of notes from here and here thinking through, why don't you start with the optional? And maybe if you start with the optional, you must always reserve 1 hour or more to attend to question 1. So there you can manage the time. And during the examination, you expect candidates to apply acquired knowledge to scenarios given in the question. You realize when you are studying, someone is going to teach you about IS1, Someone's going to teach you IS2. Someone's going to teach you about IS12. Someone's going to teach you about IFRS 13. The question is, how is it applicable? The question is going to come when it is a scenario. How is it applicable? And you find that a number of questions nowadays come saying, in accordance with the relevant financial reporting standards, they are not even mentioning the standard. So when you read through the scenario, you should be able to understand here, it is this standard applicable, it is this standard applicable, it is this standard applicable. And by me identifying the standard applicable, then you earn a mark. Then after identifying that this is a standard applicable, then you go ahead and explain what the examiner is wanting you to do. There is the difference having the knowledge of the standard and knowing how it is applicable in the real life. Because most of these questions nowadays are coming when they are speaking to real life. So even tutors who are teaching must be speaking to the real life. Don't just cling your mind to the book knowledge. The questions come. These questions come in real life scenarios. So try to create the connectivity between the book knowledge and coming to real life. Then you expect the candidate to manage the time properly. And that's when I've explained how you can manage the time properly. If you start by reading the requirements of the question, then you will minimize on reading something actually you don't need, you are not going to attempt. Or you can able to answer certain things without necessarily reading the case. If you are lucky and you find the requirements of the standard, the requirements in the question have stated in accordance with which standard, you are lucky. But if they have said in accordance with the relevant, then here even identifying the applicable standard gives you a mark. Then also you have to attempt the required number of questions, including the compulsory questions. The question is that the beginning of failure in any paper will begin when you fail to manage your time and you have failed to attempt the required number of questions. Chances of passing when you have attempted less questions is basically minimal. Because instead of attempting out of 100, maybe you're attempting out of 80 or out of 60. So raising a pass mark may be hard. So always manage your time and be able to attempt the required number of questions. Some people may fail even to get time to attempt, I don't know, maybe the capability to attempt the compulsory question. If the compulsory question is taking 40 marks and the whole paper is 100, so you are attempting the paper out of 60. Will you pass? Will you score the pass mark? So do you realize that you must attempt the compulsory question? If you have not attempted the compulsory question and you are to pass, and you are scoring out of 60, it means the 3 questions you will have attempted in section, you must score them at above 17 out of 20. Can that one be possible? If yes, then you must be in a position also to attempt question 1. So you realize that if you don't attempt question 1, chances of failing are high. And it's not that always question 1 is basically hard. And the answer is no, because you'll find it is covering a number of aspects within the standard. Like if you look at November last year, question 1 was requiring that you explain to management of MSL how each of the above transactions should be treated in the financial statement for the year ended 31st December 2022. Clearly prepare journal entries showing the affected accounts, ignore tax effects of IS12, and it was giving 30 marks. So you'll find that given scenarios that were given under each item, where actually you could attempt a number of them, and according to the examiner, they have a marks allocated to them. So if you don't attempt this, you are scoring the paper, you have attempted the paper out of 70, and what assurance do you have that you are going to get a 50? And the part B was requiring that prepare MSL statement of changes in equity for the year ended. And when you look at the question, there are those opening balance. You realize that there are some free marks here. And the other things to bring into consideration of each of the transactions out is affecting the statement of changes in equity. Do you see that now there are some journal entries being made? Do you debit this? Do you credit this? Does debiting this and crediting this affect the statement of changes in equity? If yes, under what heading? And now, this is something I must talk about. When you go back, we talked about analysis and interpretation of financial statements as covered under this syllabus. But for the last papers, if you look at them, you'll find that there has been always analysis and interpretation of financial statements, but they have not been coming as a standalone question. They come as a part of a certain question. So the institute could have taken that trend, but now you should know that here, because like in last year in November, the question one was requiring comment on the statement. The profitability of MSL for the year in 31st December 2022 was lower than that of Alpha Medicals Limited, a competitor that declared profit before interest and tax of 400 million for the same period. Now here you see it is analysis of financial statement, but now you can see the context in which there has been brought. There's another past paper I looked at, and it was saying that a company was applying to get a loan in a bank, and the bank had its criteria. And its criteria was saying that for it to give a loan, the company that must qualify for a loan must be having this kind of profitability, must be having this asset liability ratio, debt to equity ratio. So you mentioned all of those. Now they are trying to say, assess whether the company is likely to be recommended for the loan. Now, do you see where the interpretation and analysis comes in? You must look at the financial statements, be able to compute relevant ratios or relevant aspects, and be able to speak to that requirement. Because you must tell someone that maybe this company, however much it is going to apply for a loan, it will not get the loan. Because based on its financial statements, if you measure the parameters the bank is going to rely on, this company does not qualify. So instead of people wasting time applying, they should know that according to the parameters the bank has, qualifying for a loan is impossible. Then if you go to August last year, there was a question, this was question one. It was part B was saying, okay, the question in totality required to prepare a statement of cash flows for the given entity. And part B was saying, well, okay, part A had two parts. It was saying, in according to I7 statement of cash flows, explain the advantages of indirect method of preparation of statement of cash flows has over the direct method. You see, you can answer this 6 marks without reading the scenario. Then 2 was the same, prepare a statement of cash flows for the year ended. That one was covered in 24 marks. Now B was saying, assess the competitiveness of the company in the market, given that the industry in which GIL operates requires a high volume of cash to be maintained with a current ratio of 4.5 and a quick ratio of at least 3, and a debt to equity ratio of not more than 40% in order to compete favorably. So now, you will only comment on the competitiveness of this company if you compute its current ratio, if you compute its quick ratio, and compute its debt to equity ratio. Now, look at the direction they have given you and compare with the computed values so that you are able to tell whether this company's competitiveness, it's competitive or not in the industry. Now, you realize that the analysis and interpretation of financial statements has come into practice in reality. Now, someone who's preparing for this paper must understand that whereas there is analysis and interpretation of financial statements, what is its application when it comes to the real life? It's not just to say revenue increased from this to this, or profitability increased from this to this, or the profitability ratios are these. Then if they are these, the question is, so what? What is the application? So you should be in a position to give its application. So as you're preparing for this paper and you are probably studying and you are stuck under this chapter of analysis and interpretation of financial statements, the question is, so what? If I can compute this value, so what? I must know its applicability. And when you look at the past papers, all of them have some aspect of application. So kindly, always make sure that wherever you are preparing from to sit this paper, or if you are a tutor and you are teaching, kindly try to answer these questions. Are we together? Try to answer these questions. If you don't answer them, someone will reach an examination and will not be in a position to attempt. As you taught analysis and interpretation of financial statements, but someone cannot even tell that this company is competitive in the industry in which it's operating, or cannot qualify for the loan, or can qualify for the loan. Or if it is comparing its performance with another company, it can't easily mention. So, or in sometimes there was, I think I passed paper that was also talking about that the company had applied for, had bidded for something, and it required, the requirements of the bid required the company to have been within a certain range of operation. So can you apply analysis and interpretation of financial statements and give advice to that? I think you've had. So you realize that there are various causes of failure. As from what I've presented, there are a number of causes of why many candidates fail. One, there will be inadequate preparation. You've covered the syllabus inadequately. Two, you've just relied on maybe on self-reading, or you've attended lectures from one person, and maybe you have not discussed, and you only have one-sided approach to preparing for this paper. And you have not been able to tap into what others have. So you may not understand certain aspects. You have just understood them from one line. Yet you are supposed to have understood them from different aspects and be able to apply. Someone may be knowing the application of one aspect, one line, and that's the one you know. If it comes in a different, then you don't know. Some people just go to class and they don't know how to revise. Some people revise at the last minute. So I also said that if you cannot integrate the aspects covered under this paper to different business scenarios, real life scenarios, how the different standards are great with each other, then passing a question according to past papers I have seen, the car will be hard. Because these past papers are speaking to the reality. Then, of course, there's poor time management and failure to appreciate and articulate the application of the different standards in different business scenarios. I have been giving examples referring to a number of questions, but if you apply other questions still and look at it to find what I've been talking about is within, then I'm saying that basically to pass this paper, students need to understand the application of different standards covered under this paper and how they integrate with each other in the preparation, presentation, and analysis of financial statements. And candidates must combine, while preparing for this paper, must combine attending classes with the group discussions, practicing questions, and probably listening to these engagements. That's what I had to discuss with you. This is time for questions. And I'm saying that success always goes to those who look for it. If you want success, kindly search for it. And you will search for it by preparing for this paper if you want to succeed in it. Don't just prepare in the last 1 week and you say, I'm going to pass. Okay, miracles can still happen, but indeed it will be a miracle. But if you want the success, then you must look for it. Thank you. Claire, I submit. Claire? Hello? Hello?
Yes, Bonnie.
I submit.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've really been on time. I'd like to go into the question and answer session, but I'm only seeing one question. Members,
And I'm seeing the participants are 264, so I don't know whether they have listened or I don't know.
they've been listening and they're going to ask, I'm pretty sure. So we can start with Ian Murungi. Start with Ian Murungi's question.
That could you throw more light on the difference of I-16 and I-40 investment property? Okay, here in Murungi, then Winfred is saying, thank you, sir, for your guidance and how can we pass this paper? Then Francis Ibada is saying, shall we get the recordings? I think Claire will answer. Okay, to Ian Murungi, I said that I-16 talks about property, plant, and equipment. I-40 talks about investment property. My question is, these two standards actually integrated to, they easily integrate with each other. Like for example, if I have my own house that I'm using for the business, it will be under PPE. But if I decide to rent this house out and I get out of it, that house ceases to be property, plant, and equipment, and now becomes investment property. Now, if you go to investment property IS40, you will find the transfer to and from investment property. So you realize that ideally, if we are looking at a scenario that involves someone having buildings, occupying one, using one, letting out others, then, and the question maybe is requiring, in accordance with the relevant financial reporting standards, you may need to critically read that question to understand it deeply, to know which asset I am to apply I-16 or which asset I'm to apply IS-40. You remember assets under I-16 are for business use. assets under IS 40 are for capital appreciation or earning revenue, some income from them. So someone should be able to tell that distinction. Otherwise, an item can easily move from being IS 16 to being under IS 40. And an item can also move from IS 40 to being IS 16. In that instance, now, how would you recognize and what is the measurement? I hope you and Mrunja have made some clarity. So if you are understanding, if you want to understand 16 and 40, I would urge a tutor to teach both of them at the same time. Are we together? I submit. I'm reading about the how can the marks be scored, i.e. how to present right. I talked about, if you read the requirement of the question, you understand what the examiner wants, and eventually you will understand to what limit I should provide the information, other than writing some information that is irrelevant. Or as I'm reading the case, I know that actually the examiner wants this. So part of the information may be in a question as a distractor. So you ignore you're able to ignore part of that. So by starting to read the requirements of the question, it helps you that when you are preparing, as you are reading through the question, then your mind should be taken to the requirements. So you understand that I'm reading this item, the requirement is this, so this one is connected. To what extent does the new syllabus differ from the old? Ideally, there is no much difference. The new syllabus, what is added in the old is that in the old syllabus, we never had earnings per share 33, and the new syllabus came in. And probably the rationale is that you realize that when you're interpreting and analyzing financial statements, earnings per share also could come into context. And now probably the institute realized that it's better to have earnings per share under this paper, so that as someone is analyzing and interpreting financial statements, also it can apply the earnings per share. I'm saying that animals in a zoo accounted for using which standard? Philip Kabagambe. In this case, animals in a zoo, they could be property and plant equipment for wildlife. Philip Kabagambe, are you hearing? Let me give you an example like this. If you look at the purpose why they're kept in the zoo, does it fall under PPE? Does it fall under agriculture? Or there could be a combination of a number of them there. One time I'll share the question is that these police people who have sniffer dogs, how are those dogs treated? Isn't it property, plant and equipment? If I have a dog at home as security, is it a biological asset? It will be a biological asset if I'm breeding it. Or if I'm rearing it and afterwards I sell it. But if I'm using it for security, doesn't it fall under PPE? Go back to look at people who use the cows for digging. Are those cows basically agricultural biological assets? Or they are part of the property plant equipment? People who use donkeys for transport. Food for thought. Immaculate Nwanga was saying IS 41 and IS 12. When some questions are not so clear, like if you buy 100 cows and sell at like 90, when mature, but from the beginning, the oral cattle is for sale. How do you account for 10 not yet sold? Ideally, this one is basically you are rearing cows, and you are keeping them they are degenerating, they are growing. So at every tide reporting time, probably the value based on the measurements under IS41 come into play. But at the time when you decide you are going to sell them, at that particular point, they become inventory. Now, the value that you transfer to inventory at that particular point is the last value you used to measure them under IS41. This is how you measure the harvested item coming from agriculture. So the person is saying, how do you account for the 10 not yet sold? The 10 not yet sold are just accounted for as still under 41. If you look at the fair value movement and whatnot, by the ones who decided you're going to sell, they will be accounted for at fair value, let's go say, then at the point when you decide to sell them, when they become inventory. Someone is saying, however, thanks for your presentation, it has been clear. However, in scenarios where standards are integrated, do you state them integration? Okay, the point is where standards are integrated, when you look at the real life scenario, the question that is presented before you, you will find that they will be saying, how can we treat this? Probably management is asking you and you must give professional guidance. The question is, you will find a number of standards appearing in a question. So you'll find that maybe item 1 will be treated using this standard. Item 2 will be treated using this standard that is up to this point. So ideally, you don't have to mention that the standards are integrated, but you should be able to identify how to treat certain things. Because at the end of the day, the overall learning outcome of this paper is at the end of the day, you should be able to prepare financial statements, and all aspects must be feeding into the preparation of financial statements. You should be able to interpret and be able to interpret them. So whether the standards are integrated or not, you don't have to mention, but when you read the scenario and understand it clearly, you should be able to identify this one is to be treated using this, and now you can show its treatment. This one is to be treated using this and show its treatment in accordance to the standard. I gave you an example that someone dealing in motor vehicles is actually, his inventory is the motor vehicles. So whereas another person, the motor vehicle is under PPE, to someone, what he would be under PPE is actually inventory. So you are going to say this motor vehicle should be treated as inventory under IS2. Now you go to the application of IS2. Another person will go to say this motor vehicle should be treated as PPE. Now you go to PPE, but depending on the case. James Dennis is asking, does IFRS 1 and IFRS 2 included in the 2024 syllabus? I think the syllabus I've showed what is covered in other syllabus. Can you please throw more light on the aspect of reporting, especially after calculating a figure in a respective standard? I don't understand what Innocent Fred is trying to say, but the question is, after identifying that this item is going to be treated by this standard, then you can go ahead and say, how do you recognize it, how do you measure it, and how do you present it? But now, if you come to interpreting, like the number of questions I was reading about interpretation, it will require you to coming from preparing something, then be able to arrive at interpretation. Now you will find that based on what you have prepared, it is expected that you must interpret based on what you've prepared. You understand? So it may first require that you first prepare, then come to the interpretation. What is the best way to approach question one? I told you that if you can attempt it, you can begin with it. But always make sure that you use at least, don't go beyond 1 hour and 20 minutes. If you go beyond 1 hour and 20 minutes, you will have used more time on question one. If you have to do it last, then always reserve at least 1 hour. Someone is saying, what happens if I'm not familiar with this, with what the standard, with what that standard that is being examined? Then it means if you're not familiar with that standard, then you may not be able to attempt. So whatever you will be giving, you will be just imagining, and what you've given may not be speaking to the requirements of the standard. So most of these questions that are saying that with reference to the relevant financial reporting standards, you must be able, knowing the standard, how it is applied, so as to be able to give a treatment of a certain scenario. If you can't define the standard, then you cannot apply. How do I approach a question beginning with advice management? The question is, you'll find management probably in a dilemma, or management has approached you for advice. In that sense, if management has approached you for advice, then you must be able to understand the dilemma in which management is in, and be able to compute and maybe analyze whatever you're supposed to analyze to be able to answer management. So you'll find the question is, the management is not, is unclear on how the above should be treated. Then in your advising management, you should be telling management should treat these items as follows. Like there's a question in November 2023, that's question 2. Part C was saying, advise the management of VTL using the relevant computations where the cash generating unit is in, whether the cash generating unit is impaired or not, and any deferred tax effects thereof. So it means your advice to management is to ascertain whether the cash generating unit is impaired. So you must assess whether the cash generating unit is impaired. And if the cash generating unit is impaired, if the answer is yes, then you must tell the management that the cash generating unit is impaired. If the answer is that the cash generating unit is impaired, does it have any deferred tax effects? If yes, what are those effects? Then you give them. So pull it from the knowledge perspective and bring it to the practical perspective. Because if you are to meet these things in real scenarios, those are the problems businesses are having. And now you should be, after covering this paper, you should be in a position probably to prepare financial statements and advise accordingly. Someone say, may you kind of throw more light on IFRS 16, particularly financial and operating lease? See, everything is treated as if the financials. When it comes to the lessor has the option to either treat it as a finance or as an operating lease. So as you are reading most of these standards, you need the key information you must understand. If a standard has been changed, what is that has been changed and updated? I sat for this paper last year but I got 47. I kept on wondering what went wrong, but today I've realized that my journal entries, double entry skills are lacking, and I thank you. Okay, thank you for the comment. Probably next time we'll pass. Someone says, what is the best possible way to internalize each IS? Ideally, I told you that I was preparing for this paper, you shouldn't take one-sided approach when you're preparing. You must be able to go to class, you must be able to discuss, so in that kind of a way, you should be in a position to come up with, you should be able to grasp the contents within each standard. Someone is saying during the preparation of cash flows, we look at direct and indirect methods, but most questions use indirect. Can the direct approach be of importance? If the standard mentions that the direct and indirect are covered under the standard, probably at one time, you may see a question that is requiring using direct method. So, one time it may require using direct method. I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in here, but a number of them, generally, I have talked information that can speak to them. And I believe if you take into context what I've said as you prepare, you should be in a position to understand and be able to apply the requirements of this paper to any paper that is before you. And you should be in a position basically to pass. But as I have said, success comes to those who look for it. You must prepare. And then success also finds you when you prepare. Someone is saying, are there marks for stating the standard say like I-16 requires? Yes and no, depending on how the question is set. But if I forget the standard and I can apply everything good, will I be wrong in the whole question? Like for example, if your question is asking that if something is inventory, okay, and you state everything that this thing will be treated like this, like this, like this, like this, I believe sometimes you can forget the standard and you can mention the requirements under the standard and you apply collectively. Chances are, by chance, you're likely to pass it, right? But two, if you cannot state the standard, then, and you just give how something should be treated, in your explanation, you are likely to mix more than one standard. And that one will make the whole thing wrong, because you've not understood what you are supposed to do, and you've not understood what you are supposed to apply. How best can I manage my time? I talked about it. I think, Claire, I think a number of questions I have hinted on almost everything. Someone is complaining that this paper is too barrack. Provide some guidance on how they handle this preparation for exams. I don't believe this paper is too barrack, because I've been able to present, for example, a number of things together. But if you are preparing and you look at how integrated this paper is, and as you are preparing, we get to know if I'm looking at this standard, it can easily apply here and apply here in conjunction with this, then you understand it better. Other than understanding standard by standard. I think the problem is many candidates will go to tuition provider X. That tuition provider teaches a number of standards and does not teach everything. Then they go to tuition provider Y, who also teaches a number of standards. So there, you fail to have some of these standards integrated. Otherwise, now in your discussion, you should be in position to answer these, integrate these standards and know the application. Otherwise, if you should be putting this question to the tuition providers and they tell you. Clear? I think I submit.
Yes, thank you very much, Bonnie. As listening as you are responding, but just give us one final guidance on this. This was asked by Alex. He's saying, if I quote the wrong standard and make the right workings, will the entire number be wrong?
Ideally, there you are right, not quoting the wrong standard.
Wrong standard, right working.
If I say, if the question is saying, in accordance with the relevant financial reporting standard, and me, I say IS 16, isn't it? Yet, the item requires to be treated under IS 40. It means whatever I would be giving does not speak to IS 16. You get it? I have mentioned that item X will be treated in accordance with IS 16. And what you've gone ahead to give, it's contents of IS 40. So ideally, in my view, you don't understand what you are saying. You are better off not mentioning the IS 16. So if you are not sure of which standard is applicable, you rather keep silent about the standard and leave it to the examiner to determine that actually this person is talking about this standard. Claire, I think I have answered that question. Otherwise, if you mention the standard and you give everything in reference to another standard, not the one that has been mentioned, ideally you not be knowing what you are talking about.
Exactly. So members,
you rather not
sure,
mention the standard and give something plain and leave the examiner maybe to decide. But if you quote the standard and you talk something different to that standard, you are talking completely two different things.
Okay, so that is well understood. So if you do not know the standard they are talking about, don't risk. That's what you're saying, Bonnie.
Exactly. You rather
right away with the workings.
You rather answer plainly and don't mention the standard. If you mention the standard and it is not what you've mentioned, what you've written, then it cancels it wrong.
Then I found this one from Timothy, much as you're concluding with a Q&A. This is another scenario of maybe mixed standards. Someone is saying, kindly explain on the integration of IFRS 3, IFRS 10, and IS 27.
IS 27 is not uncovered under this paper. So if a question is to come under this paper, it is likely to combine IFRS 3 and IFRS 10. And this is about basically accounting for groups. One talks about preparation of consolidated financial statements. Another one talks about business combinations. You realize when you are preparing consolidated financial statements, these two standards are used together. When you are business combining, when you're preparing consolidated financial statements, you find yourself adding subsidiary in the parent. Basically, here you're using aspects of business combination. where you are eliminating intercompany using aspects of business combination. When you go to consolidated financial statements, that's where you bring in the issue of consideration and what not, and what you are giving, and eventually goodwill comes into play, what not. So, as you are studying consolidated financial statements, basically you find you are applying the requirements of IFRS 3 and the requirements of IFRS 10. But IAS 27 is not covered under this. So, what is not covered under this, kindly bow from it.
Yes, Timothy, IAS 27 is not examined at this level. So I think he gets it now. Then there's this one from Francis. What is the probability that the new standards introduced will be examined? This one, I'll tell you, Francis, don't spot, read everything that is on the syllabus. I think, Bonnie, you agree with me that.
Yes, I do.
So it's not a matter of probability. You could find a standard that was examined in the previous sitting in the next sitting as well. So don't gamble with the probability of you passing.
Okay, the key issue, they must look at the learning outcomes. Every paper that is examined by ICPAU is addressing the learning outcomes that are set under that paper. So as someone is preparing for this paper, kindly look at the learning outcomes and ensure as you prepare for this paper, all the learning outcomes have been addressed.
Okay. Then this one is from Rodas. Okay, I'll pardon myself for mentioning the name. She's asking that throw some light on writing a report. Did you give them guidance on writing a report? Just a brief.
Okay, depending on the requirements of the question, they will say maybe prepare a report on management explaining ABCDE. The structure of the report will give you some mark, but ideally, the content within the report is mostly answering the requirements of the question. Because the structure may only earn you like 1 mark, but the content is what is going to score you more of the marks. So some people may think that if it requires a report, if I don't give a report, have I failed? The answer is no, is a no. You have not failed. As long as whatever you've written is communicating to sorting out what management maybe wants or whoever has given you the task wants, eventually you'll have answered the requirements of this question, but you'll only lose marks for communicating that information in the form of a report. When they say that you prepare a report on ABCD, know that the report format will earn you like a 1 mark, but not substantial, but the contents of the report are the ones scoring a lot of the marks.
Okay, I think they get it. Now this one is from Fortunate. And Jimmy would like to respond to it. Jimmy, are you online? CPA Jimmy, are you online to respond to Fortunate? I think he's not ready, though he had requested to respond to it.
What was it about?
It is, thank you for this insightful session. However, if I find myself in a scenario where I've not yet attempted question 1 and time is up, will it affect me in any way?
Okay, I have said that if you start with section B, the optional questions, always reserve at least 1 hour to do question 1. If you find your time is caught up with you, kindly in the last 1 hour come and attempt question 1, because you have I've told you that it covers a bigger portion of the paper. And if you don't attempt it, chances of failing are high. I submit. However, there's someone saying, what is the relationship between sitting center and passing the exam? This is basically psychological. Some people think that if I sit from here, I will fail, or I sit from here, I will pass. But basically, the sitting center has nothing with passing the exam, because all of you are sitting the same exam. Passing the exam will be based on how you prepared for the exam. I submit.
I think this one is going to be the final one. It's anonymous. It's saying, much as he's saying, excuse me, Claire, but Bonnie will be the one to respond. IS 20, is it not government grants and disclosures? We have covered it. How come it's not examinable?
Is it about IS 20?
He's saying he hasn't seen it in exam.
Okay, that person should refer to this paper. Let me see, a moment. Oh, that person should look at the November sitting, question 2. There was a company that tours and travel company, and was saying on 1st of July, purchased a hotel in Kanungu for a certain amount of money and received shilling 150 million from the government of Uganda as a grant towards the cost of purchasing that hotel. Now, it means that person does not understand how these standards apply in the real life. But as I read these questions, I realize a certain company bought certain hotel, and received some money towards the purchase of that hotel as the government grant. Also, now a grant is coming in. Now, do you see the application of IS 20? And the requirements were saying, explain how the above 2 grants will be treated in the financial statements of the company for the end of 30th June 2023, using journal entries and financial statements extracts. Now, it means here, key, as you explain, you must give journal entries and financial statements extracts. If you don't give those 2, you lose out on marks. So, that person asking that question kindly, maybe you've not internalized some of these papers, but IS 20 has been examined. Only that you probably been reading and not understanding the question. I submit. Clear?
Yes, thank you very much, Bonnie. I think it is now very clear that IS 20 has been examined in the most recent past. So let us endeavor to read everything that is on the syllabus. So
Yes,
allow me.
people that let them not spot.
Yes.
If you spot and you are spotted out, you will cry out.
It is dangerous to spot. Members, let's not spot.
And now, because of the integration of the way, and now because of the questions being integrated, having more than one standard. If you say I'm not reading this standard and you find a question that is integrating with that standard you didn't read, then it means you can't attempt that question. So if you have spotted, though some of the things you've spotted have come, but because they're integrated with some things you spotted out, then you lose out.
So thank you very much, participants. You've been very, very active. It has been very insightful and very interesting. Thank you very much, dear presenter, CPA Bonaventure. You really, really guided us so well, and I'm sure the pass rates are going to be higher this time around. Come May, people are going to pass. Thank you very much. I would like to conclude by, I think this question will be answered by our coordinator, CPA Esther. From Dennis, he says, when will the financial reporting books be available? He has been checking, he has not been able to access them. So kindly, Esther, as I hand over to you, kindly respond to this concern. Otherwise, thank you very much, members.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, CPA Claire. Thank you so much, presenter, for that guidance. And thank you for always supporting the profession. We've always called upon you on a number of occasions and turned up. We are very grateful. Thank you, CPA Boni. First of all, apologize for some of the study materials not to be here, but what we can promise that very soon we are still printing, and then when they are ready, I think the information will be sent out to the students. But we are very sorry, because remember, writing is a process. You can't write a book in a very short time, so we are still correcting some things here and there, that they'll be out soon. I promise you, when the books are ready, we shall send out the information to the students, and then you'll be aware. But in the meantime, there are a number of resources that you can consult. Even the previous study material can work, and then you can consult the textbooks as well as the internet. I think the content for this subject can be got from a number of sources. Thank you so much. That is what I can say for now.
Then Esther, also guide on the possibility of members getting the presentation or even the PDF of this presentation.
Yes, when the webinars are all done, we are going to compile all the recordings, and then we shall put them on the portal, on the website, as well as the presentations. So you'll be able to get that information. It is going to be on the ICPAU website. Thank you, CPA Claire. So our next webinar is CPA 8, Financial Management. Please turn up in large numbers. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.